Want to learn about the benefits of transforming your propane or diesel fleet of forklifts over to purpose-built, integrated lithium-ion equipment at ProMat? Go visit Big Joe Forklifts in booth N7157 at ProMat in Chicago, March 17th to 20th. With almost 75 years in business, Big Joe has established itself to be your trusted partner when electrifying your internal combustion fleet of forklifts. Big Joe has knocked down the last remaining barriers to electrification with its purpose-built, integrated lithium-ion forklift solutions with performance that rivals internal combustion equipment at just a fraction of the cost to maintain. Big Joe's broad line of counterbalance forklifts are built around an industrial-duty lithium-ion battery designed, manufactured, and supported all by Big Joe. Come see their solutions and meet the Big Joe leadership team, including Martin Boyd, Jason Dunnigan, and Nick Malwecki, March 17th to 20th at ProMat in Chicago, booth N7157. That's booth N7157.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to have three guests join me. So we got a little bit of a full house here on the podcast, and that's because we're going to be talking about an interesting partnership within our realm, within the industry, which is the partnership between Zebra Technologies and Körber Supply Chain. And we're going to be joined by Andre Luecht, who is the Global Strategy Lead of Transportation, Logistics, and Warehouse for Zebra Technologies, as well as Mark Delaney, who is Mobility Solutions Leader over at Körber Supply Chain, and another Mark as well. So we're going to have two Marks today. Mark Butler, who is a Global Partner Manager for Zebra Technologies additionally. So we're going to talk a little bit about their partnership. We're going to talk about what that means and maybe why are they partnered together in the first place. So we'll get to that. And then we'll talk a little bit about, too, the evolution of warehousing in itself from a manual type of industry to now becoming a much more digital industry, and what does that really mean, digital, when we talk about that. And we'll also talk a little bit about some data capture technology and also a project that Zebra and Körber have collaborated on to really give you an idea of what that partnership means. So Andre, Mark, welcome to the show. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
Thanks for having us.
Definitely happy to get you all on. Happy to have this conversation today and learn about this partnership, definitely. So why don't we kick things off maybe for people that are not familiar with Zebra Technologies or Körber. Mark Butler, why don't you kick us off here and tell us, just kind of brief overview of Zebra Technologies and what it is that you all do.
Well, sure. Thanks, Kevin. I think many people might know Zebra from our barcode printers, barcode scanners, and handheld computers. But probably a more accurate, elevator pitch, could be something like, because of the organic growth and acquisitions, Zebra Technologies and our technologies such as AI, RFID, machine vision, robotics, and even other technologies really transform the way that organizations can track, manage their assets, kind of give the assets a digital voice, basically ensuring smart decisions and improved outcomes for the customer. So it's more than just the handhelds or the devices that people may be familiar with in retail environments and hospitals and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely Zebra ubiquitous throughout the supply chain, I will say there. And how about the other Mark Delaney here from Körber? Why don't you give us a brief overview of what you all do?
Sure. Yeah, Körber is a leader in the warehouse management space, WMS for short, right? What a lot of folks don't know about us is we also have an OMS solution, right? Order management solution. And then we're very happy to have just completed an acquisition of Mercury Gate that now sort of rounds out the portfolio, which is a TMS, right? Transportation Management System. So we tend to work with very large organizations globally. We tend to tackle some of the tougher problems. Whether you're deploying a WMS for the first time or you're replacing an existing one, it's a little bit like open heart surgery, right? It's a lot more complicated than it seems. So some of our deployments tend to span 12 to 18 months at times. But in that, of course, we're uncovering and utilizing a lot of data that I know we're going to talk about later, and also sort of ensuring that we understand the use cases, understand the working environments, and that's a lot of the collaboration that happens between Zebra and Körber.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously both sides here, two different companies, but coming together and tons of supply chain exposure, knowledge, working with tons of different sides of the supply chain, not only just companies, but different departments and areas of that supply chain as well, I'm sure. So very interested to know here too about the partnership and what that entails. So Mark B, you wanna kick us off here and tell us a little bit about what this partnership entails and maybe kind of like how did this partnership come about too?
Well, sure, yeah. Facets of the partnership have really gone back many years, but it was really done kind of an ad hoc approach. In one region of the world it was handled one way, another region of the world it was handled another way. And at the beginning of 2023, we pulled Körber into our global partners portfolio. So it's been almost 2 years at this point. But what that did is allowed us to provide kind of a strategic wrapper, from sales, technical, marketing initiatives, and so forth, to really do things much more strategically than just this ad hoc approach that it was handled before. Just to give you some perspective, our global partners in our portfolio, it really consists of a handful of partners actually, and most of them are household names. Included, those are a couple of large, global consulting firms, a couple, the largest networking companies, and then we have Körber Supply Chain software as well as part of it. I did mention that the global partners in Zebra's portfolio have the ability to be extremely strategic with us, and that really is it's a very high touch, close relationship kind of approach. But from the customer's point of view, I think Körber Supply Chain software, the partnership with Zebra provides an extra layer of confidence that the customer's software investment and the hardware investment will live up to their ROI and TCO expectations.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add to that, Kevin, just for sort of full disclosure, is prior to joining Körber, I actually spent a large chunk of time at Zebra. So that's one of the reasons I'm very comfortable talking with, colleagues like Mark and Andre. And it also provides a little bit of a unique point of view, because now I can take to the Körber organization some of the learnings that I've had when I spent nearly 10 years of my career at Zebra. So certainly helps customers, and we can talk more about that later as well.
Yeah, definitely interesting there. So the partnership is basically because Mark missed you guys, it sounds like.
Yes, it does predate Mark Delaney, but yes, we definitely missed him. Yes.
Definitely, but that's great to hear, and it's great to hear too. You're able to form that relationship, and be able to rely on each other and kind of build upon that as well. And so we mentioned here that obviously both Körber and Zebra have been around for quite some time, and this partnership sounds like it's been around for some time as well too. So obviously seeing a lot of the changes and evolutions within the warehousing industry and what's been going on here as well, especially from a technology perspective. You both have kind of been on both sides of that from a technology standpoint. So maybe Andre, you want to chime in here a little bit and tell us a little bit about kind of what you've seen on the evolution of warehousing from, a traditionally pretty manual type of industry to now getting very much digital in a sense. How has that evolution kind of shown the light to you?
Good question. So from pencil and paper, no one really needs technology to run a warehouse, but you need a lot of technology to run a warehouse well, right? So that is the kind of starting point. Decades ago, all we had were paper and pencil. And then with the attempt of the arc of digital journey at the beginning, the starting point is trying to turn some of the stuff, some of the workflows, some of the items that are being moved in a warehouse into something that a warehouse management system, an ERP system, a transport management system could make sense of. And in order to do this properly, you need to capture data and make that data available to the systems. So in that journey, in that digitization journey, there are a number of companies that are more advanced and more developed than others. In general, if you walk through the warehouse environments today, the evolution hasn't quite as evolved as we wanted to see it. So you still see a lot of pockets of very basic transition from paper and pencil to a simple barcode reading. What you see in the industry publications, the use of AI, the fully automated warehouses, I think are still in their infancy. We're just scratching the surface of what is possible here. But this is an industry that has to deal with a lot of assets. The refresh cycles are longer than some technology refresh cycle, right? So there's a lot of activity in this space, but quite a few of the warehouse operators are still at a stage where the next transition point might be going from barcode reading, barcode scanning to RFID, whatever it may be, and less full automation or Gen AI use cases.
Very interesting there. And Marks, you want to add anything in here?
Well, I would just say that, I think Andre is absolutely right. I mean, if you are in the industry or you spend a lot of time in industry publications and that sort of thing, you would sort of tend to believe that a lot more of our customers have gone, fully automated or gotten off of pen and paper altogether.
Yeah.
But it's really not the case. I do agree with Andre 100% that we're still pretty much at our infancy, but the next, 5, 10, 15 years are going to be very interesting to watch in terms of some customers, for example, that we work with are trying to move off of pen and paper, but they know that they're far behind. So they want to see if they can actually leapfrog their competitors a little bit and get further ahead in terms of use of technology. So there's a lot of folks trying a lot of different techniques out there, and it's our roles as industry leaders to help guide them down the path properly.
Interesting there. And interesting you mentioned that the certain companies trying to maybe leapfrog their competitors there in a sense by implementing the technology and maybe being ahead a little bit, and the kind of ties back a little bit to what Andre said there about, you don't necessarily need technology to run a warehouse, but you do need it to maybe run it well in a sense. So where we are, I think companies are at varying degrees, right, of what does this, digitalization look like in a sense, and, where are they in terms of adoption of technology, because, they certainly can do the things they need to do without technology, as Andre said there. But, as, we see an increase in volume, or we see, a more competitive environment, how do they continue to do that with maybe resisting technology in a couple scenarios, I'm sure, or, being behind a little bit in technology. But, I guess let's get a sense for when we talk about digital, right? We talk about a warehouse coming from a manual type of setup and moving to a more digital setup. How would you define digital in a sense, right? Because I think, we think about the latest technology, and as you kind of mentioned there, Mark, you read some of the trade publications, or you see some of the things that are just out there, right? In the ethos, like, you think that like, oh, man, robots are running all around every single warehouse all over the place and all these things, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean digital in a sense, right? So Andre, like when you talk about, a digital warehouse or transitioning from manual to digital, what does that mean kind of at the foundation there, and where does that really start?
Very good question. So I see two separate use cases, for lack of a better term. One is documenting progress. So basically, if something moves from one site to the next, if at some point you capture the data at a different location, you know that something has transitioned, or if you have added value to something that is transitioning through your warehouse, that would be one. The other one is physical location, to know where your items are, where your assets are, where the inventory is, and making sure that through data capturing, you can provide a picture of your inventory that allows you then to optimize it and help you fulfill or whatever subsequent processes may be. So two things. One is progress documentation. The second one is location documentation. And those are two of the key use cases or workflows that lend themselves to first level of digitization or digital data capturing.
Interesting there. And now when you're capturing that data, so now where, if we look at it from a digital perspective in a system side, I guess in a sense, right? Because, I think Zebra, as Mark B mentioned early on, people think Zebra is, scanning barcodes, right? And scanners and things of that nature. There's a lot of other stuff going on that you guys do as well. But obviously that data has to flow into something, right? So Mark, from the Körber side, I mean, tell us a little bit about, at the beginning of that digital side, like where does the systems perspective kind of come into play?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's where the data actually gets ingested into our systems and into our tools, right? So typically if you look at a deployment of a WMS from a Körber and a Zebra perspective, we'll go in there fairly early on, right? Because we've got to go in there and we've got to understand the workflows. We've got to understand what data they have, what data they don't have, right? It's all about data quality, right? But then at some point, we're going to need to ingest data, right? To Andre's point, in terms of, okay, where are those pieces of inventory? And the only way to do that effectively is by leveraging some sort of technology, whether it be, a simple handheld mobile device, whether it be more efficient with RFID or something like that. But at the end of the day, you're trying to improve the workflows, the processes within that environment, the warehouse, right? Because, let's face it, working in a warehouse is not always a pleasant job, right? And it's sort of like trying to find a needle in a haystack. If you're trying to fulfill, especially in Q4, if you're a retailer, you've got your foot to the floor right now. You're trying to get inventory out there and into customers' hands as quickly as possible, because especially if there's one thing that COVID taught us, it's that A, we can get 90% of what we want online, right? And B, we can get it faster than we ever thought before. So, whether you're a manufacturer, a retailer, any sort of supplier, anyone moving goods, right? There's a very high expectation, whether it be the end consumer, that they should be able to find product very quickly, and you can be able to get it in and out of your DC very quickly. And the only way to do that effectively is leveraging technology.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting there to see, because we get so lost in a sense. And I even think about I go to like a conference or trade show or something, and the thing that's in front of us, right, is all these robots and things like that. I mean, even like humanoid robots now as well, right? But at the core of these kind of digital transformations is in that essence, right? Like, how are we capturing that data? How are we just tracking progress and those locations, as Andre said there? And then how are we putting that into a system that's going to help guide us further, right? To be able to take the next step. So Andre, you mentioned in there, people, still utilizing pen and paper, right, to do some of these things, which, they're still out there, definitely. So for somebody in that position, I mean, how do you even, with all the technologies out there, like we just mentioned, trying to transition out of that could probably feel pretty daunting, I imagine, right? It can feel kind of like, where do I even begin? Where do I start? So like, how would you recommend they kind of start on that path that you were saying there?
That's a $64,000 question. So if you have the wherewithal to start a greenfield exercise where you build a brand new facility, you can pour all technology into the site and design the workflows and all processes accordingly, that's great. But 80 to 85% of the market cannot do this. So they sit in existing facility or brownfield kind of environments. And every single one of our customers or the participants in the market have unique challenges. If the instance of your warehouse management system is, 10 years old, and you want to deal with the constant feed from an RFID reader, that might require some work. If you have only 2 years left on a 5-year lease, your ROI requirements are different than if you just start a brand new facility. Right? So the overarching recommendation that we see growing in the market is point optimization. So basically you look at one process step and see if you can optimize that. You got to be very careful not to create bottlenecks on the left and the right of that process, right, for subsequent processes. If you're picking faster and your staging or your packing isn't up to speed, then you just created some bottlenecks. But point optimization, because that's something you could potentially retrofit if you can improve your material intake or storage, put away, something along those lines. That seems to enjoy a lot of attention and seems to be very attractive. Short of building new, what can we do with the current footprint we have? Because the requirements are the same for everyone in the market. The requirements are being set by the consumer, and the consumer wants to see the order fulfilled or the shelves stocked. The willingness to accept a stock out or a 7-day delivery time window is probably limited at this point. So you have to compete with the best. And the consumer usually doesn't care what your inventory situation looks like in a compromised old warehouse. You still have to fulfill according to customer expectations. So long story short, optimization of individual isolated workflows is the way to approach this for a lot of the folks in the market.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You don't want your employees to be idle, so why would you want your robots to be idle? Zebra Technologies is addressing idle robots by bringing their latest solution to the market, which requires 30% fewer robots, resulting in increased asset utilization and a cost-effective entry to automation for your fulfillment operations. The Zebra Symmetry fulfillment ecosystem is bringing you balanced utilization, more cubic capacity, and optimized pick paths so you can operate at peak performance. Want to take your fulfillment operation to the next level? Learn more at zebra.com or click the link in the show notes. Interesting there, and I think that's good advice, definitely. And I know that you said that there's different factors in there, like you mentioned. You have just 2 years left on a 5-year lease, and these different things to consider, and obviously avoiding those bottlenecks as well that you mentioned in there. And I think that it's good to have some direction in that sense of where to start with all the options that are out there. And speaking of, I guess, lots of options that are out there, obviously from a data capture perspective, which it sounds like is kind of at the core and really that first kind of stepping stone into digitizing your warehouse and making it a more digital environment. What is kind of some of the latest technology that we're seeing? I know, Mark, you mentioned RFID in there a little bit, but tell us a little bit about what type of tools or what type of data capture technology should people be looking at or be aware of that's out there, like in the current environment?
Yeah, so I mean, probably more Andre's bailiwick than mine, but I can talk to what our customers are doing, right? Just
Sure.
simple things like mobile computers with long-range scanners, right? I mean, Zebra tackled that problem years ago, right? But there are still a number of DCs that I walk around in where they're pulling products off of a bay, right, 2 or 3 bays up to bring it down to scan it to put it back up, right? So that's a sort of ghastly workflow, right? Any CFO would look at that and say, "Oh my God, what are you doing? It just took you 10 minutes to do something that could be accomplished in 2 seconds," right? So simple things like, right. There's also been a lot of movement on the Zebra side around things like fixed industrial scanning. So instead of having to physically have someone with a handheld device, right, just have on 2 sides of a bay for receiving, just have everything scanned as it crosses that threshold, right? Much more effective, similar to RFID without requiring RFID. But again, right, makes the process that much faster, that much quicker, that much more accurate. As long as, to Andre's point, you don't, because all of a sudden, if you're receiving 3 times as fast as you did 6 months ago, but all the other workflows that are further down the path aren't improving at the same rate, then all you do is you create a huge work stoppage there, and it creates a lot of friction in the system. And if there's one thing you don't want to create friction in is it's a warehouse environment, right? You want to keep products moving as quickly as possible from the point that they're taken into the warehouse to the point that they're shipped out of the warehouse. And if you can do that quickly and effectively without creating those bottlenecks that you alluded to, right, that's a win-win, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think reducing that friction is so important. And Andre, what did you want to say there?
Yeah, so I think the labor shortage we've seen over the course of the last 2 years served a bit as an accelerant for a lot of people to look into new data capturing technologies, and some of them being RFID. Mark mentioned that. Vision is something that we see a lot of interest in that object recognition, optical character recognition in the sense of reading barcodes. Long-range scanners, we mentioned that. So some of the innovation in this space is actually driven by the fact that we had limited access to qualified labor, and you still need to capture the data. And how do you do that? Ideally, you do this automatically through some technology infrastructure that you've put in place.
Interesting there, and it's interesting you pointed out the limited labor, kind of caused and pushed for some of that technology advancement, right? Because how do you still get done what you need to get done, and in some cases, how do you get done more than what you had to get done before? Because the volume continues to increase there, especially like if you look at a e-commerce application, for example, and I think it's very interesting there, and so when you said vision, are you referring to like computer vision or
camera vision, computer vision, and combine that with, and I guess no conversation is complete in 2024 without using the term AI, but but combine that with some intelligence that helps you decode what the camera is looking at. Whether it is the barcode, I don't want to say that's easy, it's a complex undertaking, but does it have the right shape? Is it the right location? There's so much more that a camera can capture, but we're just in the beginning of that kind of technology to augment what is available. But there's a great deal of interest out there because you can easily see how trained models that have looked at a lot of parcels, have looked at a lot of pallets, get better over time, right? So there's some smart algorithms that can help you develop your data capturing capabilities using vision going forward.
Interesting. Yeah. Because I know that I've seen some stuff with like smart glasses too as well. So I wanted to clarify what the vision side was. So very interesting there, and definitely I think that data capture is super critical. I spent a lot of time in my career in inventory control, so obviously a big fan of data capture when it's done correctly, for sure. So
just to clarify, maybe
sure.
I meant fixed and mobile cameras more than the glasses technology. Talking about infancy, I think a form factor that sits on your face, might need to carry a battery, etc. That is probably even further away in terms of mainstream adoption than mobile cameras or fixed cameras that you can use fairly quickly. Think about scan tunnels, etc.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. And thanks for the clarification. Definitely. And yeah, I mean, I think that, some of the technology that we're seeing is certainly very interesting and certainly is, looking to augment some of those labor challenges as well and be able to capture just as much as we need to without necessarily having to, as you said, have somebody, do that capture themselves. And, maybe there's some kind of a fixed thing that can capture that as well that you just mentioned there. So really interesting there. Now, to give us kind of a sense of the partnership and kind of maybe an example of how you guys have come together and partnered on a project maybe or collaborated on something, why don't you kind of share with us maybe a recent project that Körber and Zebra have been partners on?
Yeah, I can take that one. So 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe 5 weeks ago at this point, both teams, and when I say both teams, I would say the Körber account manager and some of our technical resources, as well as the Zebra account manager and his solution engineer, we had a mutual customer, right? And they were looking to move from pen and paper to, some form of digital, right? So they invited us into one of their newer DCs. It was about 300,000 square foot. If I disclosed the name of the customer, I think, your listeners might be a little surprised that they're still on pen and paper, but we'll just leave it there.
Okay.
But the benefit to the customer was they now had 4 or 5, I guess there were 5 of us total, right? 5 industry leaders, right, walking around their DC, trying to understand workflows, looking at what was going on the, like actually on the floor. We came up with a bunch of different options, solutions, things that we were recommending. We went upstairs into a conference room above the DC, right, laid out a bunch of gear, right, for lack of a better term. And then we actually pulled some of the folks off the warehouse floor, to, play with the gears, so to speak, to understand, hey, from a form factor standpoint, does this scratch the itch, so to speak, right? Is this something you think you can work with? Is this something you enjoy working with, right? So, in the course of one afternoon, right, this customer got the benefit of two global organizations along with our experts, giving them essentially, free consulting for the day to come in and understand, what technology might work to solve their particular issues. Because the flip side of the labor issue is, as you well know, the retention rate in the warehouse industry is horrible, right? In a lot of cases, these folks just cycle through 60, 90 days later, they're going to another DC because they perceive the work as being easier, perhaps. Well, there's a bunch of ways that you can alleviate that, right? One is by perhaps putting, the right technology, and notice I said the right technology. So that's where that day that we spent together, right, came into play, because a person who has not worked on a warehouse floor might make a decision around a particular piece of technology. And then when the worker actually decides to start using that technology, they're not happy with it at all. So that retention rate actually suffers, right? Or you see something like gamification, right? That's starting to come into play, right? Where, some of the older workers that have been around for a while, they're just happy with a keyboard and a screen and they're fine. But if you're, let's just say under 30, right, and going into an environment like that, you've been brought up with the iPhone sort of stapled to your face. So if you can employ some technology that, makes it a little bit more fun to do his or her job, right, gamification being one of them, right, then, two good things happen, right? Number one, you have a more happy associate. So your retention rate hopefully declines a little bit. And, oh, by the way, they become more productive, right? So that's, so you're hitting two levers at the same time with a very small, investment in technology. So, a bunch of different ways, but the example of that is, that's one example. There's also a process that Zebra employs with their customers. They do what they call executive briefings. And so now what we've started to do over the past few months is we've done executive briefings together. So where the customer comes in and they've got folks from Zebra and Körber both in the room, understanding what their strategic vision is, understanding what their issues are, right? And it's a great way to demonstrate a partnership, because any partnership can be put onto a PowerPoint slide, right? But a customer really doesn't care about that. What the customer cares about is, is there a value that I'm going to get out of engaging both of these folks because they're partners? And I think the more that we can continue to demonstrate that, the more we're going to create stickiness with our mutual customers.
Very interesting. And I think it's great to be able to get that. Like you said, have four or five, people from the industry that have extensive experience, dealing with these things, come and be on your floor and pick apart and examine and look at all these different processes that you're doing and, give you those recommendations to, what could really benefit. And I love that you said, you brought in the warehouse workers themselves to look at some of these devices and see them, because that is such a huge difference. I mean, I did, was part of an organization at one point that, when I joined, we had all these devices kind of just stashed in the back of a closet. And I said, don't use these. And they're like, well, IT decided on them, and they didn't consult the warehouse workers, and they hated them. So they just live in the back of the closet, basically. So, I think that's such an important part to bring in there. And it's great that, with the expertise, you're able to recognize that and help, maybe your customers, clients, if they don't recognize that already, to recognize that too, and, help them understand that. And from the Zebra side, anything you guys want to add in terms of that collaboration there?
Well, I think I would add that, over the past year or so, Körber Supply Chain Software and Zebra, we've kind of jointly, aggressively been going through each of the Körber Supply Chain software solutions and putting them through what we have at Zebra, something called the Zebra Solution Validation Process. So what that does, it helps ensure that, Körber software solutions, when paired with Zebra's hardware solutions, have been tested together to minimize surprises, surprise for the customer, or if maybe something unforeseen does happen, to minimize finger pointing back and forth and so forth. So we've been aggressively going through the different Körber software packages. Mark mentioned gamification. That was definitely one that was early on. More recently was one with Körber One Voice, the latest version of Körber One Voice, which is a voice operations software and using voice picking as well. So we've gone through and we tested, validated with like the Zebra TC3, our MC94, which everyone knows, the WT64 wearable, and even this 2-inch Android WS50 with a little 2-inch screen. So that's one of the specific ways where, a customer will benefit from the partnership between Körber and Zebra.
Interesting there, and you see it if you're watching on video. You see that Mark just has just the device handy there. He just wears it all day. Very nice there. So definitely, I think it's great to be able to tap into that experience overall and get this, kind of, because it is very complementary, right? In a sense, right? These devices on the data capture side, the software that data is going and getting ingested into there, as you mentioned earlier, Mark. I mean, it's super important for that to flow and work together. So I think the partnership just makes natural sense, right? And then for the customer, the client, I mean, they get so much value, I think, from that too, as well, to be able to have this collective combined experience in the industry kind of bringing together to the table for them. So really interesting to learn from all three of you here today and learn about the partnership and kind of this idea of digitalization too in the warehouse and what that kind of really means, and maybe how to demystify some of the high tech expectations there, and how to really get started in that. And I think at the root of it is that data capture, and how is that data going to flow into the system to allow you to do the things you need to do and do them well, as Andre said there in the beginning. So really appreciate you all coming on here. And if people are interested in learning more about the partnership and getting in touch with Zebra or Körber, I mean, what's the best way to go about that?
Certainly you can visit our website, but certainly you can also feel free to pass along my contact info as well to anyone who might be interested. Happy to talk to them.
Okay. And Mark, from the Zebra side?
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar. Zebra.com for the website, and I know you have the Körber Supply Chain software website as well. We'll reach out to myself and or Mark. LinkedIn works as well.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information, websites, links, LinkedIn at thenewwarehouse.com and in the show notes here, so people can easily find it. So Andre, Mark, and Mark, thank you so much for joining me on the show today, and thank you for your time.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.